Have fun in prison.
You talking? I'm beat you the fuck out. You look good.
You're not gonna do nothing.
Bitch, I will beat you the fuck out.
Enjoy prison, baby.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
You get him. See what she said to me? Did you not see what she said to me? She said you look good, right?
Let's be real for a second. You ever watch something online and immediately think, yeah, this is exactly why people are fed up? Because that's what this is. You've probably seen the video by now. Situation on a plane, things get out of hand, people get removed. And instead of it ending there, it turns into a whole spectacle. Dancing, acting wild, no sense of seriousness at all. And you're just sitting there watching it like, what are we even doing? Because at some point it stops being funny. It stops being just a viral moment. It starts to feel like something deeper is off. And I want to talk about that, not just about what happened on the flight, but what this kind of behavior actually represents. Because if we're being honest, this isn't new. This isn't rare. This is becoming expected. And that's the problem. Now, look, I'm not here to act like airlines are perfect. They're not. Anybody who flies knows that. Delays, cramped seats, fees for everything. It is what it is. But here's what doesn't make sense. How do we get to a point where people are getting detained and instead of being embarrassed, instead of taking it seriously, they double down and turn it into a performance? Think about that. You're already in a bad situation. Authorities are involved. There are real consequences on the table. And the response is to act even more reckless. That's not just a bad decision. That says something about mindset. And this is where people start to get frustrated because it's not just about those individuals. It's about what everybody else has to deal with because of it. Families on a flight, people trying to get to work, someone traveling for something important. And now everybody's stuck dealing with the chaos that didn't have to happen. And here's what this actually looks like in real life. You save up, you book a flight. Maybe it's a short trip, nothing crazy. You just trying to get from point A to point B. And instead you end up in the middle of a situation like this. Now your flight is delayed. Now there's tension. Now everybody's uncomfortable, all because a few people decided they didn't have to carry themselves a certain way in a public space. And this is where it starts to connect to something bigger. Because let's not pretend like people don't already have expectations when it comes to certain airlines. People talk, people share experiences, and reputations get built over time. And when situations like this keep happening, it reinforces those expectations. Right or wrong, that's reality. So now it's not just about one incident. It's about how people start to view the entire experience. And that affects everybody. It affects the airline. It affects the passengers. It affects how people choose where they spend their money. Because at the end of the day, people aren't just paying to get somewhere. They're paying for a certain level of peace. They're paying for an environment where they don't have to deal with nonsense, this ghetto-fied nonsense. And when that disappears, people notice. And this is where it doesn't add up because none of this had to happen. None of it. All it takes is a basic level of self-control, a basic level of awareness, understanding that you are in a shared space with other people. But instead, what we're seeing more and more is the opposite. And the question is, why? Why does it feel like standards are getting lower? Why does it feel like people aren't taking accountability the way they used to? And why does it seem like when something clearly goes too far, there's still this attitude of it's not that serious? That's what we're going to break down because this isn't just about a flight. This is about behavior, consequences, and what we are starting to normalize. So I want you guys to hit that like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel. And with no further ado, check this out in regards to the matter.
Trouble at the terminal ends with 3 women in handcuffs. And tonight, police say it all started over baggage fees moments before a Philadelphia-bound Frontier flight. Deputies say the trio forced their way onto the plane, and when law enforcement told them to get off the plane, they refused. CBS News Miami's Anna McAllister is your reporter live at Miami International Airport where the outbursts happened. Anna?
Lauren, just imagine this. You just boarded your flight. You're waiting to take off. But then 3 people on your flight, they get into it with deputies and the flight staff. And then everyone is forced to deplane, including yourself. Well, that's what happened over the weekend when this Frontier flight was heading to Philadelphia. And these 3 women, they got into it with not only law enforcement, but the staff there. Check out this cell phone video of the moment that these 3 women had to deboard the plane in handcuffs. Check this out. Yeah, you look good.
You're not gonna do nothing. Enjoy prison, baby.
This This happened last night at MIA after 26-year-old Davana Cochran, 21-year-old Dionjana Cochran, and 30-year-old Nafisa Dockery refused to get off their Frontier flight. Now, according to the arrest reports, it all started after a Frontier worker told them they would have to pay for their baggage. Investigators say that they refused and then got into an argument with the employee. After the employee told them that they would not be allowed on the plane unless they paid for their baggage, they stormed onto the plane. Deputies were called, they went onto the plane, and they told the three of them that they had to get off. Well, the arrest report states that the deputies, they asked them multiple times, but they refused. Law enforcement was then forced to have the entire plane evacuate in order to arrest this trio. And during the struggle, deputies say that Dockery spit on a woman. And we showed Frontier passengers the video of the women being escorted off the plane. Here's the reaction.
Let's break this down in plain English, because this is where people start dancing around a real issue. What you saw wasn't just people acting up. It was people showing you exactly how they carry themselves when they are consequences involved. That's the part a lot of folks skip over. Anybody can make a mistake. That happens. But how you act after the situation goes left, that tells you everything. Here's what this actually looks like. You're already being removed from a flight. That means something already went wrong. At that point, most people are trying to calm things down, figure out what happens next, maybe even feel a little embarrassed. That's normal reaction. But instead, what you saw was the opposite. It turned into more noise, more attention, more behavior that made the situation worse. And that's where people start saying, okay, this isn't just a one-off. Think about being on that flight. You're just sitting there. Maybe you got a connection to, you got a connection to catch, right? Maybe you're traveling with your kids. Maybe you got somewhere important to be, and now everything is delayed because a few people decided the rules don't apply to them. That's the part that hits everyday people. It's not entertainment when you're stuck in it, and this is where the airline conversation comes in, because whether people want to admit it or not, different airlines have different reputations, and that's just reality. You hear it in conversations all the time. People will say things like, I already know how this flight gonna go. That didn't come from nowhere. That comes from repeated experiences. Now, let's keep this fair. Budget airlines serve a purpose. Not everybody needs a luxury experience. If you're taking a short flight, you just want to get there. That's it. There's nothing wrong with that. Plenty of people have taken those flights and been just fine. So the issue isn't the airline existing. The issue is what ends up being tolerated in those airline environments and at the airlines. Here's where it doesn't add up. When the cost of entry is lower, you're naturally going to get a wider range of this ghetto-fied behavior. That's not an insult. That's just how access works. The easier it is to get into something, the less filtering there is on the front end. And when there's less filtering, you're going to see more situations like this. Think about it like this. It's the same reason certain apartment buildings feel completely different from others. It's not always about the building itself. It's about what it costs to live there. That price point creates a certain level of expectation. Not perfect, but noticeable. People are paying not just for a space, but for a certain type of environment. Airlines work the same way. When you pay more, you're not just paying for a seat. You're paying for fewer problems. You're paying for a smoother experience. You're paying for peace of mind. That's why people choose certain airlines over others, even if it just costs more. They're trying to avoid exactly what you just saw. And again, let's just keep this grounded. This isn't about saying one group of people is better than the other. This is about behavior, because you can put anybody in an environment and if they don't know how to act or got no home training, you're going to see the same outcome. The difference is how often it happens and what's allowed to slide. And here's what people are really reacting to. It's the feeling that standards are slipping and nobody wants to say it out loud. It's the idea that no matter where you go, you might have to deal with something like this, and there's no real accountability until it's too late.
It's really crazy. Like, it's disturbing, because why are you acting like this towards the workers? I mean, you know the rules and regulations. When you read the flight, they give you all the information, the rules. You know you're supposed to pay for baggage. Why act like this? That's insane.
And these are the individuals, unfortunately. Now, let's go a little deeper, because this is bigger than just airlines. From my perspective, this comes down to standards, accountability, and how we understand freedom. In this country, you have a lot of freedom. You can travel, you can move around, you can live your life without someone constantly controlling you. But that only works if people have a certain level of self-control. And that's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The Constitution gives you rights, but it doesn't remove consequences. The founders were very clear about that. Freedom was never meant to mean do whatever you want, whenever you want. It was always tied to responsibility. And when that balance gets off, you start seeing situations like this more often. Here's where it doesn't add up. People will say, it's not that serious. They're just having fun. But think about where they are. This wasn't a club. This wasn't a private event. This was a plane, a shared public space where everybody is relying on things to run smoothly. There's a time and a place for everything, and this wasn't it. And when people ignore it creates problems for everybody else. Now, to be fair, there are people who will argue that airlines themselves create stressful environments, tight spaces, delays, policies people don't like. And that's true to an extent. But stress, sorry, doesn't excuse behavior where you can stress enough to allow unacceptable behavior. Everybody on that plane is dealing with the same conditions, and most people manage to handle it without turning it into chaos. And that's the difference. That's where personal responsibility comes in. And this is why people start talking about culture, not in a vague way, but in a very real sense of what gets accepted and what's corrected. Because if behavior like this keeps getting brushed off, laughed at, or turned into entertainment, it's going to keep happening and being culturified to a simple fact where it becomes this ghettofied culture. And right now, it feels like the line keeps moving. And what used to be considered unacceptable is now getting shrugged off like it's no big deal. And over time, that lowers the standard for everybody. And that's why this conversation matters. It's not about overreacting, it's about recognizing patterns before they become the norm.
Group is charged with battery, trespassing after a warning, and resisting an officer. They're expected to appear in bond court tomorrow, and we did reach out to Frontier and MIA for their statements, and we're waiting to hear back. But for now,
at the end of the day, this really comes down to something simple. How do you carry yourself when you're in a shared space with other people? Because that affects more than just you. It affects everybody around you. And from my perspective, that's what people are reacting to. It's not just the incident itself. It's what it represents. It's the feeling that basic standards aren't being taken seriously anymore, and that frustration is real. People are tired of dealing with situations that could have been avoided. People are tired, right? With just a little bit of self-awareness and discipline, this could have been avoided. This isn't about being perfect. Nobody is perfect, but there's a baseline level of respect that has to exist if things are going to function properly, especially in a shared space. And when that starts to disappear, everything else gets harder. Travel gets harder. Public spaces get more stressful. People start avoiding certain situations altogether. And that's not a good direction, because in a country built on freedom, things only work when people choose to act responsibly without being forced to. And that's the balance. That's the standard. And when that standard drops, you start seeing more moments like this, unfortunately. So yeah, my view, this wasn't just about a flight. It was a small example of a bigger issue that a lot of people are noticing, but not always saying out loud. And the question is, what do we do about it? Do we keep lowering the bar, or do we start expecting better? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. I'll catch you next one, family. Love you guys. Peace.